Okay. Okay. Hey, welcome to those of you who are already on the call. I'm just going to give it a few seconds for the rest of the masses to join. We have a lot of people who've signed up for the webinar today. So let's just give it a little while, and then we'll kick things off. It's great to see the numbers steadily rising. Hello, Rita. I definitely won't be able to say hello to everyone personally. There's loads of names coming through right now, which is great to see. So as soon as the clock strikes 2 minutes past 11, I think we can kick off. Morning, everyone, or evening if people are calling in from different time zones as well. So I think we will kick off. So hi, everyone. So welcome to this Unmind webinar, Sleep Like You Care, an antidote to toxic sleep culture. So the number of people who have signed up for this webinar and the number of people joining in right now, I think clearly shows that this is a topic that resonates with people. And so, my hope is that we can provide some useful insights and information and trigger new ways of thinking about this topic for people today. So throughout the session, please feel free to post your questions in our question and answers box. And then I'll do my best to come to some of those towards the end as well. So first of all, what is a toxic sleep culture? I guess I'd describe that as a culture where being a workaholic is expected and sacrificing sleep is glorified. It's known by some as hustle culture, where it's almost cool if the grind never stops. I think that's some of the language that's used, the grind never stops. Now, as a co-founder of a fast-growing startup or scale-up, I think I didn't mention that, I'm the co-founder of Unmind. I can relate to this. There were years where I used to sacrifice sleep for the sake of getting more work done. But I've definitely learned my lesson. It's not worth it. And I should have known that, as someone who suffered from insomnia for 10 years of my life during my 20s. But now I prioritize my sleep almost above everything else. And that might sound dramatic, but it's not when you realize that getting enough good quality sleep is like the foundation upon which all the truly important things in your life are built. Healthy relationships with others, your physical health, your mental health, being able to use your mind well, think well, be creative, being of service to others, and so on. All of that's built on sleeping well. And I'm sure we'll dig into some of that as the session progresses. So in today's webinar, we're going to explore this topic through real life story, through expert insight and advice, and the sharing of ideas that hopefully we can all take on board to challenge toxic sleep culture. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. So first of all, sorry, I've just got a message to make the gallery view here. Hold on a second. Okay, I've got gallery view. I'm hoping that's good. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to welcome David. So David is operations manager for Ocado, and David will be bringing the real lived experience to this conversation. So I just want to tell you a little bit about David. So David's a husband and a father of two beautiful girls, Millie and Holly. Aside from Ocado, David runs a boxing, coaching, and a fitness class business, and also runs an Etsy store for his daughters that apparently sells mini Lego figurines. And that's become really popular over the past 3 months. So I'm taking that as meaning you've become rather busy and have a lot on your plate, David. So David's been working in logistics for 19 years. And what's relevant to this conversation today, has experienced a variation of shift work ranging from night shift to split shifts and everything in between. And I know that David had struggled with sleep issues related to work for years, and this has had an impact on his health. And so we'll be asking David to share a bit more on that as well. But David, I'll come to you in a bit. So welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
So next up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Yasu Kutera. So Yasu is the Associate Professor for Mental Health at the University of Nottingham. Yasu is an accredited psychotherapist and a neurolinguistics programming trainer with the Society of NLP. And Yasu has more than 100 academic publications across the fields of cross-culture, self-compassion, even forest bathing and motivation. So really interesting stuff there, covering really interesting territory in your work. And as a father of 2-year-old triplets, which is amazing, with sleeping problems, and a 6-year-old, I know you manage your family life and a full-time job using the skills and knowledge that you require through your work, which we'd love to hear more about as well. So welcome, Yasu.
Thank you, Steve.
And finally, I'd like to welcome an old friend of Unmind. And by old, I don't mean elderly. I mean long-time collaborator, professor of sleep science at Northumbria University and director of the Northumbria Sleep Research Laboratory, Jason Ellis. And I know Jason is in Rome right now attending the World Sleep Convention. So Jason has conducted over a decade of pioneering research and clinical practice in sleep disorder management and has written a book called The 1 Week Insomnia Cure, which I've read, and I definitely recommend the book, especially if you experience sleep challenges. So welcome as well, Jason.
Good to be here, Steve.
So I thought it would be good to kick off with some, real life stories, real life experience. And so, David, I've introduced you. I've introduced your background, and you have 19 years of various degrees of shift work. Can you tell us about the challenges that this has presented for you and your sleep? So just give us a little bit of an overview of your journey around sleep and work.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the sleep that I've struggled with over the past 19 years or so, it's been more obvious over the past kind of 10 or 15 years, I think, as I've started kind of stretching a little bit older, reaching past my 30s, reaching towards 40 now. I think, it's starting to play kind of a bigger effect on me. But the biggest kind of issues with sleep that I find is knowing or trying to understand how little sleep you can actually operate on. So looking at kind of working with 5 hours sleep a day, 6 hours sleep a day, just to try and maintain that family life, maintain that work life, and maintain some sort of kind of social life for yourself as well. Being able to fit it all in one day is, people say you've got 24 hours in the day and you want to try and use that 24 hours as much as possible. And for me, for years, for a very long time, I think sleep was at the back end of that thought process for me. And even to the point of when I've completed night shifts before, knowing that, I have a period of days off after a night shift. I say, okay, 2 days off now. So I'm not going to waste those 2 days. Let's get by on no sleep. Let's see if we can work off this off no sleep, And I have had moments where I've believed in my own ability on my own kind of sleep deprivation, trying to understand that I can catch that sleep back up at some point. And that's kind of where I've struggled really over the years. And as time's gone on, I found it more and more difficult to be able to react like that. So no longer when I finish the night shift could I now stay up. I need to get some sleep. It's not probably as much as I should have. I'm looking at 3-4 hours at a time. But that's all in all, so I can then try and have some sort of normal day with the family, or, especially if it rolls into a weekend, want to try and have that normal day with the family. You want to have that Saturday where, everybody's getting up, we're out of the house by 10 o'clock, we're kind of spending some time with the family, visiting friends. I think that the worst experience I ever had with sleep, as I can remember, was trying to do it after a Christmas shift. So obviously where I work with Ocado, we run all the way through and we run all the way up to Christmas. It's kind of our busiest time of year. And lo and behold, I thought I could be quite clever with the way I kind of rotated my shifts around or rotated my body around. And falling into a Christmas Eve, I wanted to, the kids were quite young. So at the time, they're 13 and 10 now, but at the time they were about 5 or 6. And I thought, we'll make Christmas Eve special. I'll make sure that I get up nice and early. So I managed to get home, have half an hour sleep on the settee. I got up. We spent the day together, completely worked it through. I think I went to sleep roughly kind of about 11 o'clock on that night. Woke up, obviously the kids are quite excited that Father Christmas has been, everybody's happy. We woke up 5 o'clock the next day. So I've had probably 6 hours sleep. And then we went all the way through Christmas Day, not until the evening time on Christmas, that I actually passed out on my mother-in-law's living room floor, just through lack of sleep. I had nothing left in me. There was I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I think I'd used one of the kids' bean bags that I had for Christmas, and I just passed out, gone. And they couldn't wake me up for about 4 hours. So they just left me in position. And that to me was a real kind of a kick, really, to say, look, actually, you can't operate like that. You can't go off any sleep after a night. You need to get some sleep. So I'm quite conscious about that now, especially when I'm on nights, is being able to get the right amount of sleep or a version of the right amount of sleep, I would say. I'm sure Jason will tell me something different, but yeah, trying to get the right amount of sleep is definitely in my mindset at the moment.
Yeah, David, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure Jason will have some useful tips to share for people who navigate the challenges inherent in shift work. And perhaps we can also speak a bit later, David, about maybe approaches that you've used that have helped you as well. So we'll definitely speak to that. To stay on the topic of human story, I'd also like to ask Yasu, I know that you've also experienced some of your own personal challenges in the past. Are you happy to speak to those as well?
Oh, yeah, happy to. So as Steve kindly introduced about me, I am a father of triplets. They are now 2.5 years, and we also have a 6-year-old boy. And then raising them is really difficult, especially during COVID. So those triplets, 2.5 years. So that they are longer in COVID than non-COVID in their life. And also my wife and I both, like our families are far from UK, so we didn't have any family support. Like my mother-in-law planned to come here, but the flight was cancelled, and my mother planned to come here, but flight was cancelled due to COVID. So we had to arrange those 4 by ourselves alone. And then triplets, 2 of the triplets are autistic. And some of you probably know that 50 to 80% of autistic children have sleeping difficulties. So we've got pediatrician and also sleeping specialist to mitigate these difficulties. And then they suggested all different kinds of approaches, such as daily routine, lights, music, smell, those kind of things. But none of them really worked. And we also tried medication, but it didn't work either. So the pediatrician, after trying all of these, said that, I'm sorry, you have to power through this. So we are powering through. But in this process of powering through or going through life, we've got a couple of tips to counter this difficulty. And as my research sits in mental health, I've looked at a couple of mental health issues related to sleep, including self-compassion, i.e. kindness towards yourself. And the part of the self-compassion is about common humanity. Knowing, recognizing that we all have similar desires or similar difficulties in life. And this can counter the sense of loneliness, feeling that why only me kind of thing, that really exacerbates your stress. So knowing, being aware of people in similar difficulties often reduces stress level. So in this difficulty of raising triplets and then waking up at night, I try to be aware of these people who are in similar situation, and that soothes a little bit of my mind. And then I think probably later we will talk about this, but also culture impacts how we think. And this whole webinar is about culture, and that's a very good thing, because culture unconsciously shapes our values, and we believe this is a good thing, not knowing whether this is good or not, but socially acceptable thing. And then in cross-cultural dimension, that there is a cultural dimension theory. And then I've been exploring this relating to different international cohort studies. And then UK and Japan and America, and probably many audience people here from those countries. I'm not sure Japan, because we use different language, but still are known as a success-driven culture. That in society, people respect of success or more external things. And then on the other hand, countries like Scandinavia or Netherlands are known as a quality-oriented culture, where people respect you if you are doing what you love. So I've spent many years in Netherlands, as well as my wife is Dutch, and then the questions in daily conversation are very different from success-driven culture and also quality-focused culture. Like in quality-oriented culture, like for example Dutch culture, they ask what do you do, and then I'm an engineer, or what you do kind of behavior aspect comes more. Instead, on the other hand, in a more success-driven culture, title or status comes first, like I'm a manager of, or those kind of things. So that's very interesting. And then in my research of motivation, success drivenness is related to extrinsic motivation. People work because they want external shame, money, recognition, those kind of things. While on the other hand, more quality-oriented culture, they are more intrinsically motivated. So such as feeling meaningful in what they do, or this passion, love, those kind of things. So it's very interesting. But yeah, I think those are my episode and some thoughts around my sleep experience.
Thank you, Yasu. Yeah, you've raised a lot of important things that we can potentially unpack around the cultural factors at play here when it comes to sleep. And it's really interesting, the quality-centric culture versus success-centric culture. I'd love us to maybe look at that as well. So it's a good time to potentially unpack modern work culture. And I guess what's interesting there is that this is generally pervasive, but some cultures are approaching it differently. And that's what I find quite interesting. So Jason, you have good insight into the state of sleep in the UK and beyond, and I'm sure have a good sense of some of the drivers behind the state of sleep. So can you share your thoughts of first some very high level overview of the state of sleep, but also then the relationship between our modern work culture and the impact on sleep?
I think the highest level that we can say is that it's actually changing. Previously, you snooze, you lose, I'll sleep when I'm dead. That pervasive culture around you've got to have short amounts of sleep and you've got to get up early. If you're not, you're lazy. That's been sort of pervasive in the culture for years. And now what we're starting to see is people have started to realize the benefits of good sleep. And I think that's the challenge and the change that we've seen, is that people are no longer horrifyingly focused on the negative. They're actually saying, well, you know what? If I sleep better, I work better, I'm more productive, my team are more cohesive, there's less conflict. And so what we're now seeing is people are taking sleep seriously. It's not just a symptom of something else going wrong, that it actually can drive mental and physical health. And I think that's where we're starting to see initiatives like the 4-day week and people having quiet times in hospitals and prisons being very mindful of sleep all of a sudden, because they see that the impact is there in terms of reductions in anxiety, in terms of reductions in aggression. So we're starting to see that much better now, but it's taken a fair amount of time to get there.
Definitely. I mean, that's great to hear. So that there is cause for optimism and hope amidst this. There may be some people on the call that are thinking, well, that doesn't apply to me and the culture that I'm within. And I know, I know there's this thing called hustle culture and, grind every day, that kind of thing. And I know in China, there's the 996 culture, which is working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. That's become normalized as part of the Chinese tech industry. And, you know, people are suffering and dying because of it. So I guess there's pockets of hope and optimism, and there's pockets where this culture is still prevalent. And it probably aligns with what you were saying, Yasu, around success-oriented cultures and quality-oriented cultures. It's that idea of moving from sacrificing quality of life for like just success, work, rather than prioritizing well-being, prioritizing quality of life, seeing work as a part of that. So it's like it's a shift in how we think about work and life. So yes, you touched on it, but do you have anything else to share around those differences in those cultures and potentially what needs to happen to move towards, let's say, the better way of seeing about it, the more quality-oriented culture?
Of course, yeah. Thank you, Stephen. Also, thank you, Jason, about you insightfully pointed out about culture being shifting. I think it's very important in cross culture to know that that things are fluid. But in the cross culture concept, that we kind of make it solid so that we can easily discuss and conceptualize. But that's a very good point. In reality, it's shifting. And then yes, there are many other interesting points about this culture and our health aspects. That, for example, this extrinsic motivation that's often valued in this success-driven culture, and extrinsic motivation is linked to poor mental health in general, because, as you said, that they are really pressure themselves to attain something external. Rather, internal intrinsic motivation culture is more about quality of life, whether they are enjoying their life. That's more important. So well-being is higher. Tendency-wise in those cultures. And also another study I've conducted, I found very interesting, is that I looked at ethical judgment of difference between and Jason nothing of these different two motivation styles, and unsurprisingly, that extrinsic motivation was linked to unethical judgment, while intrinsically motivated people made more ethical judgment. And also related to shame about mental health issues, that you feel you are inadequate because you are depressed, those kind of shame about mental health issues. If you are extrinsically motivated, you tend to have higher level of shame towards mental health issues, such as higher shame in extrinsic culture, and as opposed to intrinsic motivation, they tend to have less level shame. And I think it's expressed in different ways in society. For example, in Scandinavia or in Netherlands, if you look at elementary education system or even higher education, that they wouldn't mind repeating the same grade at all. Like, if you don't know anything, you are happy to repeat same grade. On the other hand, UK or Japan, repeating grade is kind of shameful thing, or a bit, people don't accept smoothly kind of thing. So that also may be related to this culture of extrinsic focus or intrinsic focus. So yeah, not only those sleeping things, but also it relates to how we think, or mental health as well. Yeah.
So just to touch on there about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So you're applying it to the workplace specifically. It's like motivated by extrinsic factors such as money, for example, versus intrinsic factors such as your own personal values and the like. Is that what you're referring to in this instance?
Yes. I mean, if it's in UK context, probably it's so, as this work takes part of personal identity more. But if you talk about this degree of how much work takes your identity in Scandinavia or Netherlands, this quality-oriented culture, that ratio may be smaller. Not maybe, probably will be smaller than UK individuals. Yeah.
So like a quality-oriented culture within a workplace, for example, might be asking the kinds of questions: how can we create cultural conditions that support the flourishing of our people, let's say, rather than how can we achieve our quarterly results this quarter. You know, that being the motivating factor. It's a more flourishing centric way of looking at the workplace rather than just
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true, very true. Yeah, and then there's a study from like Australian company, and it's seeing the industry culture is very similar to UK culture. In this construction workers culture, there is a term called walk of shame. Walk of shame. This means that workers leaving office earlier than 5 o'clock, and they feel like it's walk of shame. But that person is just trying to have good work-life balance. But this kind of that tells something about this extrinsic culture's view on it. So, as you point out, that's in line with what I've been talking about. Yeah.
And are there then, so like, I guess the question would be, so whose responsibility is it to change these cultures if we are part of a toxic sleep culture? And I'm sure probably the immediate thing that comes to mind are leaders of organizations, leaders and managers. So whoever would like to answer this, maybe I'll pose it to Jason first, like, what are the kinds of behaviors that, let's say, leaders and managers might be showing up with that are having a negative impact on sleep culture or on people's
Well, if you think about the goal-driven nature of it and the technology that we have now, that we are reachable 24/7, and that became incredibly knowledgeable and noticeable during COVID. We all started working from home if we could, and so we're all available 24 hours a day. And the other thing about that was that we started to use our bedrooms as our offices. And so you're now then blurring those lines. And I think that that's the problem, blurring the lines between daytime activity and, hopefully, David will tell me otherwise, and nighttime activity in the night. What we've got is leaders who have their own pressures naturally. And that, I think, then trickles down into the workforce. But there are some leaders who are actually now saying, you know what, if I were to take account of this, if I were to take account of sleep, diet, exercise, then actually these can have knock-on effects on my bottom line because of, we know from the Rand Corporation, the amount of productivity lost due to poor sleep. So there are movements that can be made here, but everybody's got a bottom line and everyone wants everything done fast. And we do seem to be living in an increasingly faster society, which then suggests, well, I'll sleep later. And one of the things I always get quite funny about is the fact that people actually get up early to go to do the gym. It's like, oh, they're trying to fit everything in. And it's like, I'd rather you slept and then try to put the gym in somewhere else. But it is that horrible balancing act.
Yeah, I think that probably speaks to a challenge that a lot of us face, like just trying to fit everything in. There's only so much we can fit in. I think it's really important. As a leader and manager, you can support your people with that. I think we need to reimagine our relationship to technology. I mean, again, that's going to be difficult to do, but we need to somehow take control of our time and our energy again. And that should be encouraged and supported within organizations. And you mentioned the Rand research there. It's interesting because you said everyone has a bottom line. And so that kind of thing will have a bottom line, then that leads towards sacrificing sleep. But a study that they conducted, I think in 2017, showed that the costs of insufficient sleep in 2020, just in the US, would be up to $433 billion. So, I mean, like if you are thinking of your bottom line, like what you should be doing is creating cultures and conditions that optimize for healthy sleep. So, David, like to ask you to respond to this from like a lived experience kind of way. What does this all mean to you, like from a work perspective? And I know that you also manage people. Like, what does this mean to you? What are you thinking right now when we discuss this?
So listening to both Yasu and Jason, there's a few things in there that kind of stuck out for me from a personal perspective. More so, I think when we're looking at we're saying, leaders should be kind of creating this environment and trying to encourage sleep more. But at the same point, I think what's kind of quite relative in my experience and some of the managers that work for me and work with me, is that I think that also needs to come through to us also at the same time, because we've struggled with sleep on a regular basis, consistently, as leaders, as managers. We have the worry of the staff that work for us. We have the worry of our own role. We have that trying to fit and manage our role and our duties and our career progression in with our daily family, social life, etc. And trying to fit that all in. You always, as a manager as well, looking at that career progression. And I know for myself personally, over the past 10 years, working that career progression. The upsetting thing about me is that I haven't got the degrees that I wish I did kind of get when I was younger. I wasted my kind of educational years, the back end of my educational years, a bit too much. So I then had to work from the bottom up. So I started off as just a normal warehouse picker and worked my career in there. Unfortunately, that meant for me that I had to push and show what I was capable of doing. And I then put the pressure on myself then to be able to, be available at all times of day, be available whenever I was needed to be available, and show willing more than than anybody else was showing willing. And you will see that off a lot of leaders and a lot of managers. And while I absolutely agree with Jason in that respect, that the leaders should be kind of promoting sleep, but I think the businesses as a whole, from CEOs down, that should be promotion of sleep there, because from an operational standpoint, and even at the CEO level as well, I would imagine they're going through the same thing. And I think you mentioned it yourself at the start there, Steve, with co-founder of Unmind, kind of trying to get that startup business going, and the lack of sleep that you've kind of developed from there. So, and you actually mentioned it, it's the culture that we've created as a country, as a global kind of entity. We've created this and we've put this in. We think it's okay now to put the pressure on ourselves to be able to push forward, have that lack of sleep. And I think when we've met up previously, I mentioned to Jason that I've worked on the 5 hours sleep because that's what I read was right. I've read the books, I've listened to the Audible tapes and Audible books, etc., podcasts, all telling me that the right thing to do for me to be successful in my career and opening businesses outside, for me to be successful, I needed to get 5 hours of sleep a day. That's it. That's all I needed. And as time's gone on, I'm kind of creeping towards 40 now. And as time's gone on, I'm now seeing issues over the past 10 years with my weight. I'm seeing issues with high blood pressure. I'm seeing it. And all of this is relatable from the lack of sleep that I've had over the years. Because when you're tired, the easiest thing you want to do is you want to grab some food. You're not going to stand around the oven and cook because you've got a limited time in the day. So what's the first thing you're going to do? You order a takeaway, something in the microwave, something nice, quick, easy, a snack if you can grab it. And yes, I think you probably know, having kids as well, it's quite easy to grab the kids' food out of the cupboard, or quick little snack to keep you moving, keep you going, because you've got limited time to eat, limited time to prepare food. So yeah, I think I think they've both mentioned it, and it sat very well with me there. That culture that we've created from a global entity, that success vibe, has definitely kind of hit me personally, and it's made me kind of question how much sleep I should be getting. Is 8 hours? I do look at family members and friends that get 8-9 hours sleep, or maybe 12 hours sleep sometimes, and I have that thought in my head that it's such a waste of life, such a waste of time. And I have this ingrained thought in my head that isn't acceptable to have that much sleep. Like, why are you having that much sleep? That's unacceptable to get 8 hours sleep a day. I can work off less. Why shouldn't you? And is that the right thought to have? I think listening to the team we've got here today, it's absolutely not the right way to think.
David, thanks for sharing so openly and also for the pragmatic perspective as well. And you touched on a lot of important things there. There is the cultural responsibility, and there's our responsibility as well here. And we are the co-creators of culture. So it comes down to really knowing what we need from a sleep perspective. And there is, I guess, misinformation out there. And David, I think you've even spoken to some of that. And then you get some of the likes of Elon Musk saying, you can only achieve what I achieve if you work 100 hours a week. And you look at Goldman Sachs, like 100 hours a week. So there's bad role modeling out there as well. There's an invitation to leaders and managers, but everyone to role model this in a positive, constructive way. And so I guess one part of this is understanding what is healthy sleep. What do we in fact need as human beings to not only be healthy, but to be able to perform well? And I think this comes back to the idea of high performance. That's an important thing in our culture today, high performance, but we think about it in a very short-termist way. Real high performance is sustainable high performance, and you need good quality sleep for that. So I guess, luckily we have a professor of sleep science on the call. So Jason, can you tell us, what does healthy sleep mean?
I'm actually going to contextualize it first, because I think it's something that really we all need to know. During the day, we use up a lot of energy. We're walking, we're talking, we're thinking, we're doing. Actually, at night, we use up a vast amount of energy as well. It just doesn't look like it. From the external point of view, it looks like we're passive, we're quiet, we're not doing anything. But what we are doing is we are working with the immune system. We're working with the endocrine system. We're producing hormones that regulate our weight. We are regulating our body clocks. And so I think that's the thing that people haven't really got to grips with yet, that actually day and night are vitally important in terms of energy usage to keep the body doing stuff, but also to keep it healthy enough to do stuff. So what is normal sleep? Now that's a question we could have at least 3 weeks of discussion on. We've got general guidelines. Adults should be sleeping somewhere between 7 and 9 hours, but between 6 and 9, possibly even 10, we wouldn't see that as abhorrent, because there are huge individual differences. The key point is always figuring out how much you need personally. And the way to do that is, if you wake up in the morning and about an hour after you're awake, you're not feeling good, you feel tired and sleepy, then there's something wrong with the quality, the quantity, or the timing. And I think that's where we get hung up. We get hung up on number. And actually, it's more important, at least from my perspective, to get good quality sleep. Now, easiest way to tell that to the public here is say, would you rather 8 hours of sleep where you got some taking you off time to get off to sleep, you waken a couple of times in the night, and you're awake half an hour earlier? What about 6 hours uninterrupted, deep, refreshing sleep? Which would you prefer? I pretty much know that most of us would prefer the 6 hours of deep, refreshing sleep rather than the 8 hours, which might be slightly broken. And so, it's really about how you feel, which can determine how much you need or whether the timing's off.
And I mean, that's really useful. And at a practical level, what are some of the things people need to keep in mind in terms of how you actually go about prioritizing sleep? And I guess part of this question includes the fact that there are some people who have circumstances that make it more difficult. So let's say shift workers, new parents, and the like. So can you speak to that? And yes, if you have anything to share as well after Jason, then we're happy to share. I'm happy to hear that as well.
I think this is one of the areas where we do need more companies, industries, and government actually taking account with shift work. We know that shift work can be detrimental in a long-term context, but there are specific individuals that can do it and are more tolerant of it. But we don't sit there at the interview and give them those questionnaires or check those particular biological markers to tell us that person's not going to really have a problem with this. How can you incorporate good sleep into everyday life? Babies are the worst in that respect because they don't tend to sleep like adults. And so I will always tell a new mom or dad, sleep around the baby. Don't try to get the baby to sleep around you because they don't have those cycles yet. Capture the time when you can. With shift work, there are so many things we can do, and it generally falls down to the management of light, food, and exercise. Because in the real world, no, you can't. We still have to have health services working 24 hours a day. So somebody has to cover those shifts. How we ameliorate that can be based upon what kind of shift, when it happens, how frequently they happen. But also we can start to look at our lifestyle, which can actually be very helpful in managing shift work.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, so do you have anything to add in terms of stuff have you come across in your research that can be both inspire the prioritization of sleep, but or else any tips and advice that you could share?
Of course, yeah, happy to. Something that's interesting or can be inspiring is that so I also see clients as accredited psychotherapist, and then I think yeah, I can really see that sleep deprivation affects relational aspect of people's life, and yeah, I often, I don't know why, but often talk about people after breaking up, and then ask about their leading up to breaking up, and there are key arguments they had, and asking about their lifestyle, and then it's sleep is often on those list of risky things. And if you look at research papers, they talk about that when we are sleep deprived, this emotional control is very emotional regulation is very, very difficult, and often our threat mind is front, and we can't feel safe in a relationship. And then whatever you do, you say can be very compatible, and then that worsens the relationship kind of thing. And then what's difficult in this context is that okay, so sleep deprivation probably led up to this breakup, and after breaking up people can't sleep well either. So it's a very bad cycle of sleep difficulties. And from emotional psychological aspects, what I find useful, and also useful to my clients and also myself, is that this feeling of soothing mind is very important. In compassion therapy framework, there are three large emotional systems. One, threat, that's like a very anxious driven, anxious focused emotional system. And next one is drive system, that you feel temporary pleasure of seeking for incentives, but in life we don't always get what we want, so it comes down to depression or self-doubt. But the soothing system is where you feel safe and content and more relaxed. So in act of sleeping, how you activate this soothing system is very, very important. And unsurprisingly, that for people to feel intrinsic motivation, this feeling of soothed, relaxed, safe, is very important. On the other hand, the feelings such as shame or competition comes from either drive or a threat system that's leading to negative mental health outcomes. So how you practice a feeling of soothed, relaxed, safe is very important. And probably today's audience, many of you are working in organizations. So probably that there is Project Aristotle's by Google in 2017, and they looked at which team is most productive, and they're looking at the psychological aspects of work productivity. And then they found that the psychological safety, those teams that have high psychological safety tend to produce more as a team. So that kind of safety is very important to us. And then safety maybe can inform our culture as well, workplace culture or family culture of safety. That's very important.
That's really interesting stuff there, Yasu. Thank you. I guess it also speaks to just the importance of those hours leading up to bed, because the opposite of soothing is the fight or flight state that we'd be in, let's say. So if you're got a few stressful hours before bed, you're doing stressful work or whatever it might be, it's far less likely that you're going to sleep well. But if you have and this may be difficult to achieve for some people, but if you have a routine before bed that helps you to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, that soothing part of the nervous system, and there's ways to do this, which maybe we can speak to now, you've got a far better chance of getting healthy sleep. So I think that's an important thing to remember. So what I'd like to do is move on to some questions. So there's a bunch of questions that have come through, and so I'll do my best to pick out the ones that I think speak to common themes. I guess this first one I'll answer. I'll ask because I think I know what the answer would be from Jason. So I'm going to pose it to Jason, but feel free to answer as well, anyone else. This is a question from Amber. How do you rate meditation versus sleep? If you have a spare 30 minutes, do you suggest meditation or a quick nap?
Right. Well, it depends if it's napping or not.
Yeah.
So meditation's great and it does help you relax. But if you're trying to use that as a way to manage a sleep problem or sleep deprivation, they're not equitable. That's about physical relaxation, whereas actual sleep is about repairing, buffering, protecting. And so there's slightly different angles. Napping. It's always an interesting one. I get a lot of questions about napping. I don't mind napping, and I certainly do prescribe napping in certain circumstances, but make it short and make it early. If you're napping in the late afternoon, it's going to take away your drive to sleep at night. So let's not do that one. And if you nap for too long, you go into deep sleep. And I think we've all had one of those awakenings where we feel even worse when we started out. And that's because you've gone into deep sleep during a nap. So I tend to talk about 20 minutes or less, but earlier in the day, certainly not by mid-afternoon.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. I hope that answers the question. I'm going to ask a question now from Rich, and potentially Yasu and David, you might have an answer for this. So I go to bed at a good time. I fall asleep with no problems, but when my youngest wakes up early, anything before 6, I really struggle to wake up and get up, even though I've had 8 hours sleep. So I guess I'll pose it to everyone. Are there any tips to overcome this? So this question I'm asking it as parents, but then also as a sleep scientist. But yeah, any thoughts?
Can I start with why do you think you need 8? You might need 9. We are taught about this nomothetic of 8 hours. And as I said earlier, everybody's different. So I think that may be the issue here is actually your natural sleep need may be longer than that.
Yeah, I think as a parent, looking at this situation, getting if they know the child is getting up at 6 o'clock every single morning, then for me, I'd be looking to get to bed a bit earlier. It's easy for me to say that, but not knowing what the kind of social life's like, or spending time with the respective partner, or what the working time is like. But I think Jason kind of alluded to it there. But yeah, absolutely, possibly get to bed a little bit earlier, or even put the child to bed a little bit later, maybe. That might be something, so they can kind of get their sleep in, but they're waking up at a later time, so they can get the right amount of sleep that's for them. Yeah, I think for me personally, as I mentioned earlier, with the young children coming up, it was very difficult to get anywhere near 8 hours sleep. So it's quite lucky. Yasu might be able to help a little bit more on this one with the younger children.
Thank you, David. Yes, I think it's hard, and I think it's normal. And probably it's very important to know that it's hard for many people. And then what I would like to add to this part is that and then it doesn't serve anybody if you criticize yourself of that difficulty. That's normal that's normal for many people to get up and then take care of children. So I think what I want to help you in this context is that please do not criticize yourself for that. Self-criticism can lead to even worse mental health outcomes as well. And knowing that it's difficult for many people probably may be good. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Yossi, for bringing that perspective of self-compassion. I think it's really important around a topic like this. It's really important. I think a good follow-on question here, because it relates to what you said, Jason, around perhaps you're not getting enough sleep. There was a question, I can't quite find it right now, but it was around, okay, well, how do we work out our own personal sleep needs?
It's a beautiful question. What I will tend to do with people is find a period of time, and this would be, it's pie in the sky in some instances, but if you could ever do it like on vacation or whatever it is, get a week, no not being woken up by pets, partners, alarms, people. Sleep when you want to over that week, but keep a diary of that. Get rid of the first 4 days of data, because that's you catching up on sleep, dealing with sleep debt, unwinding. Those last 3 days of data really do give an indication of how much sleep you need at that time in your life. So it's a challenge to do, but you know what? It's actually worth it. If we can invest in that, working out what your own personal sleep need is, then we can really set the bar better.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. Got a question here from someone. The question is, any vitamins or natural products that you can take to help sleep? So that's a question. Are there any? But there's more context. So this person has MS and is menopausal and describes sleep as not being their friend. So first of all, Jason, are there any vitamins or natural products? I'm asking you, but feel free to answer anyone else if you happen to know.
I will tell you.
But also one addition to the question, for someone who is experiencing sleep problems due to menopause, do you have anything to share on that as well?
I have an inordinate amount to share on sleep and menopause. And this is what speaks to actually we were talking about earlier in terms of agendas. The health service in this country is actually becoming very mindful of sleep and menopause in its personnel. So I actually have done 7 or 8 workshops now on sleep and menopause because there are significant issues. And one of the biggest issues is the loss of progesterone associated with menopause also is associated with the increase in sleep disorders. Because one of the things about progesterone is it actually keeps the throat very tight at night. So it stops lots of sleep-related breathing problems. And so they tend to increase. We also get insomnia. We also get mood problems. So yeah, absolutely. There's plenty to talk about sleep and menopause. It's a shame we haven't got longer for that. What about supplementation? It's something that I'm actually working on at the moment. We're looking at different supplements. The challenge we've got is a lot of the data that exists out there already hasn't been really robustly done. And so the science isn't there yet, but we're certainly looking at candidates such as iron and magnesium. We'll get the answers to those questions probably by the end of this year. So we'll certainly have a lot more of a stronger evidence base about what those 2 particular compounds can do for us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jason. So we've got 8 minutes left. I think enough time for 1 or 2 more questions from the Q&A before we begin to wrap up. But this question, I think this is an important one. I think many people may experience this similar challenge. So I'll read the whole question in its entirety. I think it's great that our society is now promoting the importance of adequate sleep. And now it comes to the crux of the question. However, as someone with insomnia, this increases the pressure to get a good night's sleep and is extremely counterproductive. How do we balance these conflicting approaches? So I think this speaks to that relationship between needing to get a good night's sleep, the stress that creates, the counterproductive impact on sleep. So it would be great to hear thoughts on that.
All right, so I'll start by talking about omnisomnia. And this is the insomnia that's created by this desire, need to observe it, to manage it, to focus on it. One of the first things I will say to anyone is 1 bad night does not insomnia make. 2 bad nights does not insomnia make. But I think that this is, there is a double-edged sword here. We're getting lots more information about sleep, but it does create that level of anxiety. Actually, one thing that I will always say to people is if you leave your sleep alone, unless there's a serious sleep disorder in there, if you leave your sleep alone, it corrects itself. It has an amazing capacity to fix itself. But what tends to happen is we try to do things to compensate for it, which can make the situation worse.
Yeah, that's, I'm sure, really helpful. I think this relates to and this might be a follow-on, this relates to this question, but this question could be more broad. So I'll go to the question. It was around, okay, I can't find it, but it was around someone uses podcasts to fall asleep, but then finds that they wake up 2 to 3 hours later. They're able to get back to sleep, but they find that the cycle is unproductive. It's leading to not to sleep not being as refreshing as it could be. So the question is, if we have found ourselves, and this might relate to what you just mentioned now, Jason, we develop habits to try and support our sleep, but they end up becoming counterproductive. How can one overcome less than productive habits around their sleep? Like, is there any thoughts on that?
Generally, I will talk about, let's try to separate out daytime behaviors and nighttime behaviors. And podcasts are an interesting thing because they can cover both grounds. So I would tend to tell my patients, let's stick that in the daytime box. The nighttime is there for sleep. We want to create a really strong association between bed and sleep. And the way to do that is to remove all the other cues from it, and certainly anything that you might associate with the daytime.
Thanks, Jason. I'm going to ask one last question because there's been a few questions around this. Let me try and put it in a nutshell. So obviously you get larks, you get night owls, you get something in between. A lark being a naturally early morning person, night owl being later in the day. And this is all to do with our circadian rhythms and when we naturally need to sleep. Our culture is set up to best support larks. What does someone do if they are naturally a night owl? How can they approach this situation?
Well, all is not lost, because the genes that tend to influence and regulate our morningness and eveningness, they tend to degenerate as we get older anyway. So we become a lot more fluid and tolerable to changes in shifts, to a little bit of sleep deprivation. So we're not as tired as we are when we're in our 20s and 30s. So that's the good news. How do we actually manage that outside of it? It's a really good question. Biologically, that's what you are. And maybe that's the society that needs to change, not the individual. Going against your own genetics and your own preferences, which are biologically based, that's not going to be terribly helpful in a longer term. Let's see how we can try to fix our society around that.
Thank you, Jason. I mean, it feels like we could have had many more hours. It feels like we've only been able to scratch the surface, but I think we've covered some really, really interesting territory. Thank you so much, David, Yasu, and Jason, for your input today. It's been super helpful and insightful. We've got like 3 minutes left, so this can't be too long, but do you have any sort of closing message you'd like to share with the audience? And I'll begin with you, David.
For me, it would just be, don't believe the success books. You do need sleep. You absolutely do need sleep. I think, trying to work, and especially for those that are kind of starting off their management career, just getting into it, quite new to it. Don't believe the hype around you can work on a lack of sleep, because it does catch you up. And absolutely get some sleep early on. Make sure you're looking after your health, your body, and get that sleep, I would say, early in the management career. Thank you, David. And Yasu?
Yes, thank you for this webinar. And I think my message is that I think getting a sense of safety is very important to today's society. And then, safety relates to our mental health and also good sleep. You need to feel probably safe to be able to sleep. So I think, feeling of safety, I think this is a very important thing. Yeah, I feel so. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. And Jason?
I would say, don't try to sleep. The more that you go chasing the Sandman, the more likely it is that he's going to another room. Sleep is a natural process. Let it come to you. The more that we try, the less likely it's going to happen. So give yourself a break. That would be my best advice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I guess, as mentioned in the beginning, and in toxic cultures, work cultures, being a workaholic is normalized. Sacrificing sleep is glorified. It's often the belief is the best way to get ahead is to burn out. But in healthy cultures, it's like you've mentioned, yes, it's the quality of life is expected and quality of life is celebrated. So, you're encouraged to prioritize your well-being and know that the foundation for that is healthy sleep. And when we properly acknowledge the fact that well-being is essential for sustainable high performance, and that sacrificing our well-being through working too much is actually a barrier to that, hopefully we'll start to approach work differently, in a way that uplifts our health and our spirit rather than the opposite. Thank you to everyone for joining today, for sharing all your questions. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to get through all of them, but I've really appreciated your presence here today. Immediate solutions are never going to be reached over a 1-hour Zoom call, and we certainly can't change cultures overnight. But I hope that what's been covered has ignited or inspired new and constructive ways of thinking about your own relationship with sleep, and potentially how you can play a role in inspiring a more healthy culture within your social groups or organizations as well. So thank you to everyone, and here's to healthy sleep. Cheers.